Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of the Tech Webinar series. We did this last year. We had a couple of great guests on last year, and we felt it was so successful. We'd like to bring it back for a third episode. And I suppose wanted to kind of meet and speak to people who are very much specialists in their industry and use interest in tech to kind of take their company, I suppose, to the next level. So with that in mind, we've brought in a specialist in the dermatological industry, the CEO of Dermview, Eoin O'Reilly, who's a personal friend of mine, and we live beside each other. So absolutely delighted to have Eoin on board. I've heard so much about his company in the last few weeks. We've done a lot of recruitment for them, and to hear what these guys are doing is just, it's really specialist, and it's really, I think, going to really change people's lives going forward. So delighted to have you on.
Thanks a million. Cheers.
So I'd like to start off, I suppose, if you could tell us a bit about Dermview and, what you guys are kind of doing at the moment. And I know you have a few slides as well to kind of show us.
Yeah, that's okay. So Dermview basically is a teledermatology company. So the traditional model is a patient goes GP referral in to see a consultant in a hospital, and you see the consultant. The reality is about 50%, slightly more than that, actually never need to see the consultant face-to-face. So there's a global shortage of consultant dermatologists worldwide, and it's not just an Irish problem. To put the waiting list into perspective, if you don't have health insurance, you can wait up to 6 years at the moment post-COVID to see a consultant. There's just over 50 in the country. We have the lowest amount of consultants in the OECD, including that in the UK, have the second lowest. And Europe is really badly served with consultant dermatologists, really. So there's a huge issue there. If you're private and you have health insurance, you want to see a hospital consultant, 6 to 12 months is the normal waiting time. Some of them have actually closed their waiting list in Ireland. They just cannot. And that's for first-time patient to be seen. So referral volumes with skin cancer is growing about 7% per annum. So referral numbers going up and up. So there's a huge wave, and that's expected to continue growing until 2040. And that's based around us educating ourselves and our children and people about sun cream and wearing sun cream, protecting yourself. So the damage is done to all of us at our age. We're too late for a lot of it. You can still cover up sun cream, but your damage starts early in life. So teledermatology just is another way of the consultant actually getting to see that issue on your skin, but remotely. So I have a couple of slides. We can throw them up, and I'll just give you an example of the traditional model. So currently a GP refers in via the National Health System into the hospital for a consultant. And some of them, in fairness, really try and help and will take some images and photographs to try and support the referral into the hospital. But in essence, all of these images here, and these have come off GPs that send in part of our pilots and trials with the HSC. These are exactly patients that have had images sent in. And at first glance, you go, great, that's a really couple of good images. But in essence, a consultant cannot make a diagnosis from any one of those images. So if we just move on one, we'll see utilizing Dermview technology. These are the type of images that come off the system. So up in the top corner, you'll see a very good macroscopic shot. Again, any doctor with a really good camera can take that kind of image, but that alone, again, the consultant cannot diagnose. Or if you look at the one on the right there, you see a microscopic image of the lesion. Now, they can tell exactly now that that's a skin cancer. But the difference is they can also tell how urgent that skin cancer is for removal. In this case, that's a basal cell carcinoma. So it could sit there for 12 to 18 months. It's not going to expand. It's not going to grow. It won't get any worse. So the patient is diagnosed immediately. The GP is involved immediately in the care and given a pathway. Now, that pathway could be 2 years for surgery, but they know nothing else is going to happen. We'll move on to the next slide. So if you look at these pictures here, the red arrows, and you'll see a slight abrasion on the gentleman's face. Now, if you're a GP and you're trying to write down in words what you see in front of you and explain that to a consultant, it's impossible. So a consultant must see that patient face to face. If you look at the microscopic images, again, this is all done remotely. The consultant can actually verify that is a skin cancer, and again give it its appropriate surgical timeline and also where it needs to go. So this would end up with a facial Mohs surgeon or a plastic surgeon. And again, that can be done all within, straight away the next day. That pathway is in place. If we go to the next slide. So this particular issue takes up urgent lesion or urgent melanoma slots in hospitals nationwide. So an urgent melanoma, they try to get in a couple of weeks into the clinic, and all dermatology clinics hold slots open for urgent melanomas to be brought in. So this looks like a melanoma growing under the nail. It's the most referred in urgent melanoma in the country, yet under the microscopic images, the consultant can actually tell that's not a melanoma. So it's a bleed under the nail. It'll grow out over about a year, but again, does not need to come into hospital at all and can be diagnosed back by the GP. We'll take the next one. And then this gentleman has private medical insurance and was waiting and was sent to a regional hospital. And again, he was sent as routine, not urgent. So got sick of it, ended up coming to Dermview. Within 17 days of attending Dermview, he was in surgery for melanoma in St. James's Hospital. So again, the consultant, using the microscopic images, using the medical history, could actually tell straight off this is a melanoma, and that person was brought straight in and had facial Mohs surgery done. Next slide. And this is a very, very common case. This is a patient who is in her early 20s, never had acne, but started to get acne in her 20s. She was 18 months on the public waiting list. She doesn't have VHI or health insurance. Marked down as routine. So routine would put her into a hospital in anywhere between 3 and 6 years at the moment. Again, after 18 months, she had heard about Dermview, got her GP to refer her in. Within 2 weeks, she was up in hospital on Aracatane, which is a really heavy drug for facial acne, for all acnes. But the difference is this lady's left a permanent scarring now because she's had 18 months of this on her face. There's no reversal for that. If that was detected 18 months ago, she would have no permanent scarring on her face. Next slide. So this just kind of really shows the difference between the current model and teledermatology. So the current model is all 4 of these patients must see the consultant face-to-face for a diagnosis. The reality is, if the consultant has a really high level imaging quality coming into them, they can actually diagnose that. So 3 of those will be diagnosed by the consultant and managed back in the community by the GP. But the one on the lower right, obviously, would be urgent straight in. That's an SCC. That will attach to the bone and it'll be fatal to that person. But getting them in the next week or 2, it's almost like a melanoma, would have that resolved. So that's just an idea of kind of what the issues are in the country. So that's the end of the pictures there. So Dermview themselves, what we do is we have 22 clinics across the country. Currently, we've grown that to about 35 just towards the end of this summer as COVID relaxes a little bit. GPs refer into us directly. So we get the patient's medical records, then they go into a specialist centre where a dermatology nurse uses our equipment and actually takes those high quality images. And then that gets referred to the consultant. And each consultant has different skill sets and niches. So if you're a specialist in acne, you go to a specialist consultant who specializes in that. If it's lesional, if it's medical, if it's whatever, different parts, all the consultants have different niches. The best consultant sees the case that they're due to see. And we return those back to the GP's results within 30 days. They normally come in quicker than that. We give them a guarantee of 30 days. We do work currently for HSE hospitals, for the National Treatment Purchase Fund, which is, that's the fund who funds hospitals to take long waiting patients off the list. And obviously that's our own centres, and we're growing that into the UK now, starting in July, and rolling the same service out across the UK. And then on top of that, we actually do provide our technology and software directly to the HSE, the NHS, and across the world. Really, we're looking to grow into selling our technology and platform to hospitals directly. That's kind of what we do.
Brilliant, absolutely. And look, as I said, it's amazing to hear, as I said, that it can be done remotely. Because I think most medical fields, and that's the problem with the you have to pay your GP fee, you have to pay your consultant fee, you have to pay your to get down the line, and if you don't have medical health insurance, which a lot of people don't.
Exactly. So, like typical consultant fee in the country is from €200 to €300 at the moment. That's the average across it. Most hospital consultants start at $250. Dermview is $160.
There you go. Makes total sense. So, and it's great to be obviously then from a tech point of view. How do you make this work? How is it like? What are the technologies you use, and how does that kind of drive the business
so
for you?
We take high-res cameras, and then we take a dermatoscope, which is all the consultants, well, most lesional consultants would use dermatoscopes. It's what gives the microscopic image, and they currently would look at that physically on the skin. They actually look at it. So we basically brought together high-res cameras, dermatoscopes, and then lighting rigs. So lighting is really, obviously in photography, lighting is really important, especially skin photography. So all of our rooms that we use have a special blue, special sheets, and you notice on some of that there was a lot of blue in it, and that's again for skin photography. So the nurses are dermatology trained and photography trained. So there is a special skill. We're not a cheap app on a phone that's just point and shoot. The UK do a lot of that with their advice and guidance, and the NHS have actually just going to the market now. There are recent tenders at the end of the year around a high-grade teledermatology service. So utilizing mobile tech, dermatoscopes, all of our stuff works off Wi-Fi and actually has SIM cards built into them as well. So if there's no Wi-Fi, we do nursing homes, they're remote. So the idea is the nurses can travel. So they have a small box and they bring it with them from clinic to clinic, and they can go into nursing homes, they can go into hospitals. So the traditional kind of similar systems to get that image quality is the kind of size of fridge freezer. It's fixed in a room. The consultant goes into the room, almost mole mapping machines, and that's not very flexible. So what we've built is something like MRI and CT scanning type quality with consultants viewing remotely. So the consultants have high-def screens, special image and cards in them for giving quality of images, and they can actually zoom right in on those images, really macroscopically, and diagnose from that. And then they have all the GP's information, all your medical information, your family history. So the nurse takes a very set of specific questions around your skin and your background and the issue, which are lesion or your rash, while you're there. And the consultant has all this in front of them, along with the images, and then make their diagnosis. And that route goes back through the national health mail system, which is the HSE's national secure email system, back to your GP. And that's how results are kind of transferred. And if the consultant wants to take you in for surgery or send you to a plastic surgeon, cryotherapy, whatever, that's all done within the platform.
Brilliant. And obviously you mentioned there, obviously, but the cameras, obviously that's an innovation in itself, being able to give that kind of high quality, as you said, MRI quite service in a portable way. But what way do you think, I suppose, the industry in general, but more so specifically Dermview, can innovate over the next kind of 12, 24 months into the future? What was kind of from a technology standpoint and from an in-house standpoint, I suppose?
Yeah, so we're working, biggest issue, teledermatology itself has a bit of a dirty name, really, because it's been crap pictures, crap quality, and even we've had the best quality put out into GP practices. That's our end goal. Currently we use very highly trained nurses to do these, and we want to get it out into GP. We've about 30 GPs who run the service on our pilot mode, and they still manage to get blurry images, and even though the kit's fantastic, the training takes a lot of training to get that right. We're looking at blur technology, and that's basically automating the devices that they can only take the image when it's at the optimum image quality, especially for dermatoscopic and macroscopic. So in essence, I can give it to any user, and they can do maybe an online training course for a couple of hours, and then all of a sudden the machine actually takes the image, not the human. So currently there's a bit of a natural eye involved, and we're looking to drive that out. So ourselves, Stanford University and Visual DX are working to actually build an IP and blur technology around that. And that's our biggest focus the next 18 months. That's what's going to take it mass market at that quality. And then we have an AI program we're running. So obviously we have such a huge bank of high quality images that were absolutely ideal for AI. So basically pointing out the system, if we have 10,000 images coming in this week, the system can detect the benign So you can't really detect a melanoma because it grows out like a tree. It's random, and AI isn't good at learning random. Where benign is pretty much the same over and over and over. And so we're teaching benign, and then anything that's not benign by default is urgent and goes up top.
Brilliant. I should say, because obviously, look, there's a lot of owns, obviously gives a lot of really good information. If you have any questions, there's a little ask a question tab down below. We can throw it to Owen then at the end. It's maybe a personal circumstance or even about the tech that they're using. Please do ask away. I suppose that leads me on. I suppose obviously you're in heavy growth mode at the moment with all these new clinics coming on board. What type of people do you think you're going to need, and personality-wise, how does that fit in, to what you're trying to build within kind of Dermview from a culture?
I mean, you know this from recruiting for us. I am all about personality. For me, it is about the person and their skill. I very much value people's knowledge. I don't have all the answers. My team don't have all the answers. We have a very, very good team of highly skilled people, but they don't have all the answers. So I like people who have variant roles, so they've different experiences. Very much like people who are willing to speak up. We do a lot of team kind of huddles, and especially when we're planning, we're looking to crack a solution. Something like blur technology has never been developed before, so we're totally going out into something new. We need people who are not outspoken, but willing to speak their mind and their experience. So we all have different experiences across our life, all of us. So different experiences is what I'm looking for, and absolutely that's the core skill set we're hiring. If you take developers, for example, loads of them have the exact same skill sets across the different fields they're using. That's fine. We're looking for people who kind of stand out or do. For me, I ask a lot about their personal life, so not so much about their roles, what they've worked in, and what companies. Tell me a bit about yourself, and I'll give you an example of actually a candidate who's halfway through the process with us that you've actually sent us in an interview, and it's a developer, and again, all have pretty much the same skill sets. And as I was asking about them personally, what they like doing themselves outside of work, I discovered, well, they're into plastic moldings and into trying different kind of plastic technologies and playing around with a bit of engineering. And straight away, that put that person directly on top of the pile for us, because we actually, in our device manufacturing, we actually have a whole piece around that. Now, it was never advertised, it was never part of the job spec, but straight away, that person's core interest outside of the day-to-day, I knew would fit brilliant into our team for that. Because that's something we have an external company develop and work with us, but we're always tweaking it here ourselves and trying to improve it. So I do find people who are kind of, if you have something different, shout about it, speak about it in an interview. It might be on your CV, but if you have something else to get there, obviously, hard workers, fast learners, that type of thing comes as default. For us, people who think ahead is really important. So if we're developing something today, we need to see, well, where's that taking us in 6 months? Are we going the right path? And I like people who speak up and might go, actually, are you sure that's the right path? Because what if this happens? So diverse people, I don't care where they come from, where they live, that's irrelevant to us. Most of our team are all remote, but I do personally insist everyone comes in here, at least once a week or once a fortnight. We have a team huddle and we go through stuff. That's really important when you're trying to grow tech.
100%. And you hit the nail on the head there as regards people asking, showing something different. You wouldn't believe the amount of interviews that we do on a daily basis that people just tell us the same, stuff over and over. That, like, we see it all before, but actually it's the little things like that, as you said. He'd use that specific technology in that specific market, which could add absolute ton of value, and that makes sense.
For every role, same for accountants. Like, most people would have the same core basic skill sets in their field.
Yeah.
So what's going to make you stand out to me, and it's not the CV really, it's the person. So
100%. And how does, I suppose, obviously I know, because we obviously done a lot of, from the development standpoint, we've had a lot of people in with yourself, and you obviously use PHP Laravel as kind of your back-end tool to kind of, I suppose, build the tech from. Why did you choose that? And I suppose what kind of drew you to that?
We purposely went that route, and we just found getting Jira developers really, really difficult at the moment, and that's a huge problem for everyone. So, are we going to join that market and try and really struggle to get developers, or use Laravel? So Laravel, people who use Laravel tend to be almost self-taught, a lot of them, and it comes up, and it is, yes, a smaller pool, but they're certainly easier to get. And we found that all along, using Laravel developers, it's a different, like, there's less of them, but they're easier to get, easier to attract to a company like us. A lot of their stuff is kind of mundane, and then they want to move on, they want something exciting. So we start kind of talking about what we're doing, their eyes light up, that was basically how we built it, yeah. So.
Very good, very good. And how does, I suppose, your tech, obviously, I know from our conversations before, there's similar companies, I know, like one or two maybe in the US, who do similar type of tech to you, but how does it differ from the competitors, say, in Ireland and Europe?
Yeah, so as we are kind of in-house little saying is we didn't develop teledermatology. It's been out there for many years. We didn't develop the wheel, we perfected it. So our image quality stands out. We know from talking to consultants, actually, in many countries, America, Canada, UK, we've had different consultants who are starting to get involved with Dermview, look at our technology, and the image quality is actually what stands out. And that was our ultimate focus from day one. If the image isn't immaculate, the consultant can't diagnose. And then we went from that scale onto how quickly can the consultant diagnose. So how can you pare back? Obviously, we took on all the other systems in the market, took them in-house here and played with them, and as everybody does. And what we found, they're all very clunky and old and slow. So if a consultant can't diagnose in 3 or 4 minutes, and it takes them 10 minutes to complete, they might as well have seen that patient, because they'll see them every 10, 15 minutes. So you need to do something that's way quicker. Our consultants will kind of scan about 20 an hour, where they'll never see 20 patients in an hour. So it came down to, is the image quality good enough? Is the key medical information that they need out of a huge plethora of medical information that comes from the GP and whatever, is the key points highlighted across in the top bar, so they just scan across, A, B, C, D, here's my images, I can diagnose immediately. And that is really what we focused on making ourselves really different. So they're really high level, we're not cheap and cheerful at all, we're in the high end of the market, but hence we've 25% of the consultants in Ireland on board with us. We're the third company to try and crack the HSE with teledermatology. The other two failed and never signed a single consultant. We've 25% of the market and HSE on board. We've gone through our HSE pilots. We're now gone through the final stage for procurement. So yeah, that's kind of, we focused on quality, really high quality and speed.
100%. And what, from out in the market today, obviously from what you would like to do, or whether it is or not, or what interesting tech do you kind of see out in the market, maybe within the dermatology or even outside of it?
Well, I suppose AI is obviously a huge part of what we're obviously watching. We're involved in that. The one thing about AI, there's a huge amount of smoke and mirrors, and we discovered this ourselves, even talking to different partners and people who had pieces of tools that we thought we could work with. It's not actually true machine learning. It's really advanced algorithms, or really advanced workflows. That's not really a true AI. It's not learning anything. The one thing I'd say, AI, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there, and very few actual real good AI tools. That's one thing we've discovered, and we're in the market of trying to build. And then personally, I guess me, as you know, I'm into driverless automation and driverless technology, and I'm fascinated by it and following it. And not so much for the laziness of me not driving down the road, but I can really see huge in commercial settings, safety settings, in dangerous heavy machinery, that type of stuff being automated. I think that's really fascinating. I think that'll come on really quick. Yet personal and driverless, us driving down the road, fully autonomous, honestly, I'd say we're about 10 years off, and I use that technology. So I'm hands-on with it, but I think it's really, really interesting. It definitely interests me.
100%. And I think it's I was watching to a funny enough on the driverless technology, and we've chatted about it, but I was listening to a podcast with Elon Musk, and he was actually talking about AI as kind of he found it actually he's something he doesn't want to get involved in, because it's actually the scariest thing that ever happened to mankind. Where that will end up going, you'll probably have an AI system hopefully running your company for you, where it effectively instantly picks up when someone does take a picture on their phone, it almost will send an automatic image using your technology, and that's where it's going. It's just
there is an AI, there's a couple of companies out there using AI for skin. No medical group or hospital would ever allow it at this stage, but there are private companies out there using it, and we've seen results from patients who've been really basically alerted, you've got a melanoma, get to a dermatologist immediately. They go to their GP, and then they're public and they're faced with a huge waiting list. It's really scary. And then when they get to see the consultant, they're told actually that's nothing at all. So when AI gets it wrong, it can really scare people and be bad. So I think it's something that has to be really carefully done.
100%, 100%. And then I suppose from kind of your own point of view in regards to the roles that you have open at the moment. Obviously, I know we're recruiting and look, I'd advise anyone to get in touch with myself, after this call for either roles. But say the roles that you hire now, you hope to hire down the line. What does that kind of look like for yourself?
Yeah, so right now, we've accountant position, COO. I think because they're almost filled. We've certainly a few more dev positions. We're looking for a good project manager. Certainly our development team and our project management team will grow. What we haven't taken in yet is a sales team. We've kind of managed that ourselves here because we're dealing direct with HSE and hospitals, that type of stuff. That's roles we will incorporate into the company soon, probably the next 6 months, and also international. So as we go out into the UK, we're currently working with a partner who's 280 medical centres across Europe. We're working here in Ireland and looking to grow across that. We will have an entire team based around that. So, and then we have some specialist roles that are going to come in around the AI and blur detection. So people who have actually got true AI experience, in a couple of months, their positions we're actually going after.
Brilliant. And what advice, I suppose, from a general point of view, from someone, I know you've obviously worked in a lot of companies over the years before you set up Dermview. What advice, it's a question I always like to ask, like people from different walks of life, what advice would you give to prospective candidates? I know you mentioned earlier about kind of differentiating yourself, but what would you give to people? Because look, during COVID at the minute, there's unfortunately a lot of people out of work, and it's kind of a period where there's a lot of uncertainty.
I'd always say, and it's different if you're out of work, don't waste your own time. Only go for roles you really want that really are after you. Now, it's difficult if you're unemployed, you take the first thing coming. But if that's not your situation, think about who you're going to and why you're going there, because there's nothing worse for both parties to go into a job and you haven't asked enough questions, you haven't kind of really understood what you're coming into. I certainly see startups, people think joining startups is absolutely great fun and you get shares and you have potential to make a load of money if it sells. And yeah, startups are really, really tough. They're much harder than working in any big corporate. You put under a huge amount of pressure. And so people love we've people from some of the big companies come, I want to get into a startup because I haven't got it on my CV and I want to try it out. Like, they're absolutely people we don't hire. They have no knowledge of the startup, so tough. So if you want to come down that market, it's difficult, it's really hard work and it's stressful. You need to be prepared. And if that's not your style, go for the big corporate where you get your kind of easier number and easier life. That would be mine, but really just don't waste your own time, because there's nothing worse than that you have somebody in 6 months' time or 8 months' time going, this is what I thought, and they want to leave. And it's bad for their CV, it's bad for us. That's kind of my view on it anyway. So
100%. Thanks, Bill, for that. We have a couple of questions in about from Christine here. How is the patient's journey? Trained nurse sends in his GP and then on to dermatologist. Is that the path?
Yeah, so the GP refer directly to Dermview. Dermview contact the patient. They'll have them in within the following week. They'll be in a Dermview clinic across the country. The nurse does all the medical imaging, and then immediately the consultant is remotely working on that case, that patient's case. And then the results go back to the GP, but it's done on medical need basis. And this is so different than the existing model. So you're not just next in line for if you need surgery, you're put into the line as needed. So if you have a melanoma or an SEC or something, you will be on the surgical table in a week. But if you have a BCC or something, it's further down. And then we also have a network of GPs, special interest GPs, who do cryotherapy and that, or if it's biopsy, you'll be sent into the biopsy nurse in the hospital. So just the patient flow is much easier and obviously much quicker.
Brilliant. And the second question there was how the images get sent to the dermatologist. If it's sent straight from the Dermview device remotely to the dermatologist, is there a second step one must download and then send it off for email, for instance?
No, the entire thing is cloud run. So our devices, nothing's ever on the device. The photograph and the devices are live set up to the servers. And immediately then, if the consultant's on the other end, they can actually view them. So they have high-res tablets, special tablets with graphic cards that they can actually see those. They just log onto our platform and they see the entire patient, all the data, the patient case study and everything. And the patient file never moves. It stays in our cloud security. So all security and GDPR is there. The only time it chips out is when the case is completed by the consultant, and then it goes via secure PDF and via health mail back to the GP.
Brilliant, absolutely. That's going to be, I suppose, if anyone has any more questions, you definitely throw them in. From just kind of the follow-ups on this, obviously the roles there that Eoin mentioned, and they're responding for any, I suppose, kind of tick any of the boxes. Definitely send me your CV, get in touch with me. I'll then, as I said, have a conversation with you and get the CV over to Eoin. So very much, as I said, a company in like another great Irish success story, in that sort of way. You can also follow Dermview on Instagram. I know there's some great content up there that they're posting on a daily basis. So you'll see more about what they're doing. There's actually two more questions actually popped in. Yeah. So from Dearman there, what are the blockers to scaling the business outside the Irish market, and how do you plan to overcome them?
Biggest blockers are consultants onboarding. So consultants are an absolutely finite, limited resource worldwide. So without the breadth of consultants, any teledermatology or any technology cannot be scaled. So if you don't have consultant buy-in, you're not going to scale. That's our biggest, will always be the biggest issue, having enough consultants to actually, currently we can do about 15,000 scans in a year with our capacity. There's a current waiting list of almost 50,000 in the country, so you can do the maths on that. And that's the same in the UK and everything. So getting enough consultants onboarded is always going to be our biggest issue.
100%. And I know a couple of questions there. What's the average? I know you mentioned there about the average cost of the process compared to maybe what is going to see a consultant privately. That was what you mentioned about I think it was 160 versus 300, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the average between 200 and 300 is the average consultant fee. Most the average around the 250 mark, and we're 160, and that's all. Yeah.
Well, to be honest, like in this sort of life-threatening situation, potentially you could have time is everything. So it's a time thing more so than a money thing.
Cancer is all time. 98% of it is fully curable if detected early enough, and that's the underlying problem. So people getting detected in 3 months, you've absolutely 100% survival rate to melanoma. And SCCs, BCCs the same. Early detection, is the key, and that is actually, unfortunately, the problem. Early detection can't just be met. There's just not enough consultants and too big of a population everywhere.
100%. And then the last one, that's actually a very good question there from Noel. Can any GP refer you to this, or do you have to sign up with Dermview first, or how does that?
No, every GP in the country, we're on the National Health Link referral system, which is the HSE referrals platform. Every GP in the country is on that, and Dermview are on that platform.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, that's pretty much, I suppose, all the questions I know from my side. Just want to say thanks, Eoin, for
no problem.
For joining us. And as I said, I know I've learned a ton. I know we've spoken loads about Dermview already, but as I said, learn loads again. So I know if I have any skin problems, I know who I'll be going to. So if as I said, if you want to reach out, if you have any more additional questions for Eoin, I'll post my email here in, so you can post, and I'll make sure it gets to him and gets answered for you. Yep. As I said, go through Instagram for Dermview, go through LinkedIn for Dermview, and we'd be delighted between the two of us to answer everything you have. But thanks, Eoin, for everything, and look forward to chatting to you down the line.
Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mel.